Today on Sports Central will be ranking every college football conference in the nation heading into the 2021 college football season. And this is something that I did before the 2020 season as well. I ranked each of the college football conferences in the FBS heading into the 2020 season. And that was a video that a lot of you guys liked. So we're going to go in and do an updated version of this before 2021. And you would be very surprised. A lot has changed over the course of a year in college football. A lot of conferences have gotten better. Meanwhile, a lot of conferences have gotten worse. So that being said, we're going to go and get started with number 10, which is already different. It is the Conference USA, and this was a conference that was already pretty mediocre heading into the 2021 or 2020 season. And of course, we considered the Mid-American Conference to be the worst conference after 2019. But this year, it's Conference USA. This conference was absolutely awful last season. No team had any less than 3 losses last year, and it wasn't even a full season. So, it was not a very good season for the Conference USA. Marshall and UAB were the two standouts of this conference. Marshall was ranked for a couple of weeks in there. They were actually undefeated as well for a little while until they took 3 losses at the end of the season, and they finished up the season 7-3 and didn't even win the conference. UAB won it at a 6-3 record. UAB and Marshall both. They were the main talents of this conference. We also saw Florida Atlantic, UTSA. They were both pretty decent, but otherwise this conference did not have a whole lot. You had Florida International, who I probably consider to be the worst team in the FBS last season at 0-5. They were terrible last year. And I mean, if you look at UTEP 3-5, you also had Rice 2-3, Southern Miss 3-7. So not many good teams in this conference last season. They were also 0-6. In bowl season, which is absolutely a horrendous record for any conference. And for the Conference USA, it is very clear to me that this is the worst conference in the nation heading into 2021. Number 9 is going to be the Mid-American Conference. Speaking of which, the MAC has moved up a spot. They're number 9 this year. And of course, this is a conference that's got Buffalo and Ball State both, who were the big standouts for this conference last season. Ball State ended up winning the conference, surprisingly enough. That's a team that's definitely a wild card. One season they're pretty terrible, and then the next they'll win the MAC. But they won the conference this year. They were 7-1 overall. Buffalo was also a very good team at 6-1. Buffalo was actually a pretty good team, so you didn't want to sleep on them last season. But this was also a conference that did not play a lot of games. I mean, you got Miami, Ohio, and Ohio, who only played 3 games last season. Both teams were 2-1. Bowling Green was 0-5. Northern Illinois was 0-6. Otherwise, I mean, Buffalo and Ball State were the 2 main good teams in this conference last season. I mean, Kent State was okay. Western Michigan was all right, but otherwise not much in the MAC. Number 8 is going to be the Mountain West Conference, and it may surprise you to see this conference at number 8. Usually you'd think they'd be at number 7, just behind the American Athletic, but nope, they're number 8 this year. This was a weird conference last year. They had San Jose State, who came out of nowhere and won the conference. I mean, that's pretty insane for them. Boise State's usually the one team that only wins, or the only team that wins this conference. And I mean, you had 3 or 4 pretty good teams: San Jose State, Boise State, Nevada. All 3 of them were really good. San Diego State was okay. I mean, Hawaii was also pretty good. But otherwise, this conference didn't have much. UNLV was winless. Colorado State, Utah State were both pretty terrible. So overall, from Mountain West, not a very good 2020 season, but San Jose State did end up winning the conference, and this conference was 2-1 in bowl season, which is not terrible. Number 7 is going to be the Sun Belt. This was actually a pretty good conference last year. Coastal Carolina and Louisiana both were ranked for a good chunk of last season, especially Coastal Carolina. And it's pretty unfortunate that we didn't get to see a champion in this conference last season due to COVID. But Coastal Carolina, I'm sure, is the main storyline of the 2020 season in this conference, and I think that'll be kind of the storyline heading into 2021. That'll be a very good team next year again. But I mean, you got 3 or 4 pretty good teams in this conference. You had Coastal Carolina, Louisiana, Appalachian State, and you could argue either Georgia State or Georgia Southern are also pretty good. So I mean, not a bad conference last season here in the Sun Belt. One of the better seasons that we've seen out of this conference in the past. And they were also 4-1 in bowl season. Very good record there in bowl season for the Sun Belt. Number 6 is going to be the American Athletic Conference. I think the number 6 position is going to be extremely common for the American Athletic, just because this conference is not quite as good to be a Power 5 conference, or not really up to the level of a Power 5 conference, but at the same time, they're definitely better than any other Group of 5 conference. They got Cincinnati, who is a big contender last season, probably the best Group of 5 conference team, or I'll say was the best Group of 5 conference team last season. They also had Tulsa, and Memphis, and UCF, and SMU. All 4 of those teams were pretty good as well last year. Tulsa really came out of nowhere. Memphis, UCF, and SMU were all also pretty good. So, but otherwise, you had Houston, Navy. Houston and Navy weren't very good. Tulane was 6-6, not a bad year for them. And then, of course, South Florida at 1-8 is the team that rounded out the conference. Otherwise, bowl season sucked for American Athletic Conference. They were 1-5, which is kind of why I considered maybe even putting this conference down to number 7. But just because this team's got already 4 or 5 national contenders at the top, Cincinnati was 9-1 last year. I wouldn't say national contenders, but I'd say college football contenders, teams that could be ranked. Last year, this team had 5 of them. So otherwise, yeah, the American Athletic Conference stays at number 6. Number 5, this is where things get interesting. You got the Pac-12. Pac-12 was number 3, I believe, after last year. And the Pac-12 conference after last season just was a bit of a disappointment. I mean, you had 3 or 4 pretty good teams. Washington and USC won their respective divisions. Washington got pulled from the Pac-12 title game due to COVID, and Oregon was put in. Guess who won? It was Oregon. So it's kind of a weird season for this conference. And, of course, Oregon was 4-3 overall. And the Pac-12 also did not play a whole lot of games. I mean, California and Washington State both only played 4 games last season. Same thing with Arizona State. So we did not get to see a whole lot of the Pac-12 last season, but things did not look good when this conference was playing in comparison to many of the Power 5 conferences. But this conference did have 4 or 5 decent teams. Like Washington, USC, and Oregon are obviously the top teams. Colorado was pretty good. Stanford and Utah both were also in the background. But once again, Oregon won the conference, and this conference only played 2 bowl games last season and lost both of them. So that's why they're at number 5. Number 4 is going to be the ACC, and this is a huge conference last season, or it was. They had 15 teams. Clemson and Notre Dame were at the top at 10-2. Miami, North Carolina, NC State were all also pretty good. But the thing is about the ACC, they beat number 3 if Notre Dame stayed in the conference, but Notre Dame is out, so it's only up to Clemson again at the top of the conference. But the ACC will be pretty good. I very much considered putting the ACC at number 3 because, I mean, you got Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami. All 3 of those teams could easily be above 10 wins next season. Once again, if this team still had Notre Dame after 2020, ACC would definitely be number 3. But otherwise, I mean, you got 3 good teams there this season with Clemson, Miami, North Carolina. NC State will be okay, but otherwise, this conference does not have a whole lot. They've got like 8 or 9 teams that are pretty mediocre. So otherwise, the ACC, they're going to be at number 4. Clemson won the conference last year, and they were 0-6 in bowl season. That's the main reason why this team didn't get up to number 3 as well, is because of their bowl record. 0-6 is absolutely horrendous in bowl season. The ACC didn't even win one last season. Number 3 is going to be the Big 12. This conference is definitely on the rise heading into next season. You got 4 or 5 really good teams, maybe even 6 in this conference going into next year. Oklahoma, Iowa State, both will be national contenders. Oklahoma State, Texas, TCU, and West Virginia, I will say all 4 of those teams there could definitely be dark horse contenders in the Big 12, especially Oklahoma State and Texas. So you're going to want to watch out for those teams. But K-State, I mean, you still can't forget about them. Texas Tech has Tyler Shuck as well now. So really, I'm pretty confident in 8 of the 10 teams in the Big 12. Baylor and Kansas will probably stay in their positions going into next season. I don't really see Baylor or Kansas doing very well next year. But Oklahoma did win 2020 for the Big 12 at 9-2. And this conference was undefeated in the bowl season. That's a big reason why the Big 12 is up to number 3. Number 2 is the Big 10. Now you're on to the major conferences here with the Big 10 and the SEC. Big 10, not much of a surprise seeing them at number 2. Ohio State, of course, is the main contender in this conference. Indiana was great last season. Northwestern, Iowa were both really good. Northwestern won't be as good next season, but I mean, you still got Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, which all 3 of those teams will be pretty good in the Big 10 going into next season. In the Big 10 East, then you get Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State. I could argue Michigan's going to be good again. So, I mean, even though the Big 10 didn't have the best season in 2020, I think 2021 will be right back up to where we expect the Big 10 to be. I mean, the Big 10 is going to have 6 or 7 consistently ranked teams, I think, in the top 25 next season. I mean, Ohio State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Penn State. Michigan. Those are 6 of them that I could definitely see being ranked for a good chunk of next season. And I mean, you still got Northwestern, who's a pretty good team as well in the background. So Big Ten will still be a good conference next season. Ohio State won the conference last year, and they were 3-2 in bowl season. Now for number 1, not a big surprise here. It's going to be the SEC without a doubt. This conference is outstanding in every single way in college football. You got Alabama, of course, who is the dynasty of college football right now. And you got Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss. All of those teams, all 6 of those teams other than Alabama, will be contenders next season in this conference. I mean, you could argue Missouri and Ole Miss. I mean, they were both 5-5 last season, but they were still great teams. I mean, Ole Miss knocked off Indiana in their bowl game, and I mean, even Kentucky or Tennessee, I mean, even those teams aren't terrible. So seriously, the SEC is just an outstanding conference in every way. And I mean, with Alabama and Florida and Georgia and Texas A&M rounding it out, I mean, this conference is without a doubt the best conference in college football right now. Alabama is 13-0, or they were 13-0 last season. Won the conference, and this SEC conference was also 7-2 in the bowl season. They played 9 bowl games last season, which is pretty outstanding. So, yeah, without a doubt, the SEC is the top conference in college football once again heading into 2021. So, that being said, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this list. I appreciate guys all watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you later.